Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 175.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because you are going to learn something that is absolutely paramount to your success. You're out there, you're writing offers on real estate, you're building your cash flow, you're building your business, talking to the team members, figuring out how to accomplish a common goal and get them united, going in the same direction. All of these things are challenges, and I know they can be difficult. But here's the thing. You don't know what's inside you until you are pushed in a situation to let that come out. Out of emergency, things emerge. And in this particular case, I think today's guest is perfectly qualified to help you and I understand, A, how to properly respond to those emergencies, and most importantly, emerge from them victoriously. See, some of you may remember that on January 15th, 2009, that there was a little news event known as the Miracle on the Hudson, also known as US Airways Flight 1549. There was a number of individuals on the plane, but today we are talking to the individual who was the last person. Again, he says, not by choice, but he was definitely the last person that was there. Here's the thing. When you are faced with, we'll call it a life-threatening situation, what would you do? How would you respond? How do you persevere when you feel like you don't have the things that you absolutely need? And I think today's guest is going to give us insight on how we can probably take some of those lessons that he learned, apply them in our businesses, in our family lives, and many other situations, and come out on the other side victorious. Help me welcome Mr. Dave Sanderson. Dave, you there?
I am. Thank you for having me today.
How are you?
It's an unbelievable day in North Carolina. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, we are. I will say this: we are currently. I want a refund because we pay for California sunshine and we have not been getting it, but that's okay. That's okay. Now, one of the things that I think it takes for businesses is a ton of courage. And I want to do two things. One, I would like for you to take a moment, if you would, because there could be a few individuals, especially those who might be outside of the U.S., who may not be familiar with what exactly happened and why it was so important to so many people and why it garnered news attention and why it's been so transformational for you. So if you could, for a small second, just take a moment and describe that day in your own words.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it was nothing extraordinary about the day. It was 11 degrees and snowing in New York, and I was there on the third day of a business trip that I was on. I had started in Virginia, went to Florida, then ended up in Brooklyn, New York. And that morning, we were actually doing a distribution system check. I was a sales manager for a company by the name of Oracle. And so I lived in manufacturing plants and distribution centers. And that day we were doing one in Brooklyn. And if anybody has ever been or even worked in a distribution center, you know that they open extremely early in the morning. And this one opened up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we started our day about 5 and got done about 10. So we were done early that day. Wow. I was scheduled to be on the 5 o'clock flight home, but about 10 o'clock, that's when I called the travel agent to work with her. And she put me on flight 1549. So I truly believe that I was supposed to be on that plane for a reason. There was no reason other than moving my flight up to be home a little early. And I was one of the first set of passengers to board the plane because of my status. I'm a chairman. I'm top tier. So I did exactly what I did every single time when I got on the plane. Just went back to my seat, pulled the magazine out, and started to read. And I did pay attention, which was a big lesson for me that you better pay attention when you get on a plane because you never know what may happen. But About 60 seconds after we took off is when I heard an explosion on the plane. And now, Kayla, I've never heard anything like that on a plane. Plus, you're in New York.
Right.
And so you hear an explosion in New York on a plane.
Right.
You're starting to, okay, what's going on? But so I looked out the window very quickly and I saw fire coming out from underneath the left wing. So, I quickly assumed that, okay, he lost an engine, no big deal. He's going back to the airport. We'll be back on the plane quickly. But see, that's the moment where I think a lot of things changed because no one on that plane knew at that moment what happened on the left side where I was in 15A, also on the right side simultaneously. And I truly believe that if anybody would have cross-referenced or checked in with each other, there could have been a lot of panic. And apparently,
Right.
That's one of the most amazing things on this plane is no one panicked. Everybody kept their minds and no one said a word. But as he was crossing over the George Washington Bridge, and he only cleared the bridge, Captain Sullenberger did an amazing job. He crossed over the bridge. He only cleared about 300 to 500 feet. So as you crossed over, you looked out the window, and all of a sudden you see people's faces looking up at you, and you could see their faces. That's how close it was. But as he crossed over the bridge, he said the only words he said the entire time on this plane, he said, "This is your captain, brace for impact." And as I mentioned, I didn't pay attention. I didn't know what that meant, but all of a sudden you realize that something serious is going on. So you know something's happening. So you check in really quick with yourself, because the one thing you realize at that moment is the only thing you can control is your mind, because you can't control the aircraft, you can't control anybody else, but you can control the way you respond in your mind. So you get yourself squared away pretty quickly. And most people that I've talked to that were on the plane did that. They were basically checking in to make sure that, hopefully I forgive my sins, and I hopefully I get it out there. So if something bad happens, which looks like it's going to happen, at least they could, at least you're going to go to the right place. And it was about 60 seconds after the captain cleared the George Washington Bridge when he crashed into the river, and it was a hard hit. He estimates. I know he doesn't know exactly what it was, but he estimates about 100, 120 miles an hour how it hit. So when we hit, I went back in my seat and up in my seat. And when I came back up, all of a sudden I saw light coming through the window. So I knew that I was alive, but if you know what happens after impact, things change really quickly, because all of a sudden the bottom of the plane was stripped off as he landed, and he landed it perfectly.
Wow.
But also somebody actually listened to the flight attendant and went to the back door and opened that up, and all of a sudden you've got water coming in from underneath the plane and the back of the plane. So immediately you are standing in water anywhere from ankle to waist deep, depending where you were on the plane.
Wow.
So that's what happened as we got down, and getting off the plane was a whole nother story.
Well, I mean, so for all intents and purposes, as far as you were concerned, it was any other day.
Right. Yep. Just a normal day. A business day in New York.
Right. There was nothing that you could have done to necessarily prepare for that. Nothing that anybody would have done to prepare for that. In fact, I'm guessing since you changed your flight early, because I've done this when traveling, you change your flight because you're like, I want to get home faster. I want to go to sleep. I want to hug my kids. I want to do that. That's what you're thinking about. And then yet something completely takes you in a completely different direction. Now,
that's exactly right. I was in the first class seat at 5 o'clock flight, and I gave it up for a coach seat in the back. So, exactly,
good point.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah,
that's a very good point. Like, there was no reason for me to do that.
That's right.
Except that I wanted to get home. Now, having been on a fair number of flights myself, I can say that I'm also guilty for ignoring the crew safety instruction briefing message more than once, and it's amazing that sometimes, I guess what I hear from that is that there are times where there are messages that we could be receiving that we're not paying attention to that actually have the ability to make a difference, i.e., in this case, save lives.
Most definitely. And one thing I've learned since this situation with me is that every plane is different and every emergency door is different. And when you don't listen to the flight crew and you don't pay attention and read the brochure, and all of a sudden you're put in that situation, all of a sudden you think, well, the door works this way, and all of a sudden it's a hydraulic and you've lifted up and it's flying wide open and things are happening. It's like, so you need to understand and listen. And that's one of my big missions now, is to help people have the awareness on a plane.
Yeah, you've just taken it to a completely new level for me right there.
Yep. It's wide, and every airline is different likewise. So it's please pay attention.
Yes,
Yeah,
I got you there.
yeah,
That's if there is no other lesson, just please pay attention. So
right.
let me ask you this: what goes through your mind? I mean, you've got to react, you got to respond,
Right,
you've got to stay controlled so that
right.
you don't make the situation worse. Why do you think so many people were able to do that at that particular moment? And most importantly, um, what do you think the outcome? What would have been different if that had not have happened?
Boy, I tell you, you just hit on one of the biggest lessons and distinctions of that day, which when I speak and do my workshops, I share this in detail. One of the biggest reasons that happened the way it did, once the captain and Captain Skiles got the plane down, which they get all the credit to get it down, it really came at that point to the crew and the passenger makeup of the plane. And candidly, I didn't even know what that meant until Captain Sullenberger, we were behind stage of one of the talks we were at, and he was explaining that. And he mentioned that the passenger makeup of that plane made all the difference. About 90+% on that plane were business people like me, you, who travel by themselves, who can handle themselves, who candidly, just do this all the time, so it's no big deal. You had basically one family and a few older people on the plane. So if you look at how the passengers are made up, they're mostly business people who take control of the situation and work together as a team. You contrast that with if he could do the same thing down in Orlando, Florida, or Anaheim, California.
Right,
You got Disneyland or Disney World.
right.
What kind of people go out of there? You have older people, families, and kids, which candidly is a whole different outcome. And if you watch the movie Flight, which I did, which I should have done, with Denzel Washington,
Yeah.
that flight was going from Orlando to Atlanta, and you saw chaos on the plane. I think that was the key distinction. So why people didn't lose their heads, I think people were, A, number one, checked in with themselves, and B, focused on their outcomes instead of worrying about all the different variables that were potentially could have been there.
Yeah, you just said something that I think is paramount for any person looking to achieve any goal. I mean, because at that moment, you guys, for all intents and purposes, are a group of perfect strangers, but suddenly you're united with a common mission and no designated leader, so to speak. Someone has to choose to step up.
That's exactly. Leaders stepped up all over the plane. I think I led at a certain point, and other people stepped up on certain points. Captain Sullenberger stepped up, Skiles, and other people. I think what happened was you find when you're in a time of crisis, and if you have been in the military, you'll appreciate this. Leaders step up, and sometimes leaders have to check their ego at the door and let other people with a better skill set do that. So that's what happened on the plane likewise. I think people who were leaders sometimes step back and let other people who had better skills to get that job done at that instant. But what you just said is paramount, is you had 155 people who did not know each other, who candidly did not care about each other,
Right.
come together as a unit within 6 minutes to pull an outcome that never been done in the history of aviation.
Right. I mean, exactly. It's not like there was no playbook.
Nope.
There was no, oh, I've done this. No, I don't doubt anybody said, oh, last time this is how we did it. It was, all right, we have to depend on everybody. We suddenly became interdependent with people you did not know in order to survive.
And another distinction, which I show this, and when I talk, a picture of it. I went out the right side of the plane. I went out 10F.
Uh-huh.
On the right side of the plane, there was no crew. All the crew was on the left side of the plane. So the right side of the plane was totally passenger driven. So all of a sudden,
Wow.
you have people stepping up who candidly had not been trained for any of this, had to do some things that candidly you had to do by instinct and by leadership. And I think it's a case study when it comes to pulling together on a common outcome of what you can achieve when you pull together as a team and leaders step up.
So what would you say is, where did you get, what did it take to actually get out of the plane? Let's talk about that. What did you have to actually do to make that happen?
I think there were couple different things that people had to do. Number one of the unique things that people didn't realize until later is that when we hit, the top of the seats broke back, and which gave a potential additional pathways out of the plane. People got resourceful, and all of a sudden you saw people jumping up on seats and walking down the seats instead of the middle aisle. That's number one. I think you had 3 or 4 different pathways out, and all of a sudden you get people out. That's why people got on the wing so quickly. But I didn't do that. When I got to the aisle, my thought process, my strategy was get to the aisle, get up and get out. I didn't even think about anything else. But when I got there, something happened, and I heard my mother talking to me. My mother passed away in 1997, but there was something that she would tell me when I was a child that popped into my head at that moment. It was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And see, I grew up in an environment of playing sports and athletics and Boy Scouts where everything was about the guys and the team. So that's why I stayed in the back of the plane until we got everybody out. And then you got to remember, we're about 6 or 7 minutes into this thing right now. Getting everybody getting out. I'm not making my way up the aisle. It's dark on the plane. I'm waist deep in the water. The bins are broken, so you got luggages floating in the water, and you don't know where you're going. So when I got to 10F to get out, my thought was get out, let's get out of here. But the wing was filled up and the boat was filled up, so I couldn't get out of the plane. So that's why I was on the plane waist deep in 36-degree water for about 6 or 7 minutes, holding on to the lifeboat closest to the wing as I could because it started floating out into the river, and they thought they were going to be stranded in the river. So I held it close to the wing until, because I had leverage. I could hold onto the plane and the boat. And that's that's what I did until a moment came where I had to go.
Wow. And I guess in that moment, or in those moments, I mean, how long of a time period was it specifically? Because it doesn't sound like, I mean, it probably takes longer to explain everything that happened than it actually transpired.
From the time we took off from LaGuardia, the time I got to shore was approximately 15 minutes. The time I got to the hospital was approximately 30 minutes. That's how fast it all happened.
Yeah.
and people don't realize the time, but it's the word I've used on TV is controlled chaos, where things are happening fast, but no one's losing it. So things are pretty orderly. But, it took me 6 to 7 minutes to get off the plane. I had to swim to the ferry because there was no room on the wing or the boat for me. So that's how I got out of the plane.
You're inspiring me to learn how to swim right now, just so you know.
Everybody needs to learn how to swim. That's one of the biggest lessons of that day. You got to know how to swim, man.
I'm like, wow, okay, swimming lessons, gonna put that on the list. What would you say? Now, I know that when it comes down to those emergency situations, especially in business or what have you in life, our thinking changes, and we have to draw from somewhere to come up with a better way, a better plan, etc. Do you have any sort of, I mean, now having gone through this, it's been a few years, etc. But the point is, what lessons or tool sets do you use? I know you talk a lot about, resourcefulness and there's 12 pillars, etc. I would love to know a little bit more so that when we're in an emergency situation, hey, maybe these are things that we could think of that could help us get through.
Well, I think all the training that I had all my life came into play at that day, because I think the number one skill set that everybody has, but very few people use, is the ability to manage their state or manage the way they manage their mind through a situation. Mm-hmm. If you look and talk to Captain Sullenberger, the one thing he had to do was focus on his mission, is getting the plane down, but also getting people down safely. He had a focus, and that's one way you manage your state, is the way you focus your mind. The next way you manage your state is how you move your body. And the third way is what the language patterns, or how do you talk to yourself. So I think the number one skill set and the number one resource that I and everybody using that plane that day is we all managed our states in a way that were resourceful, and no one got out of sorts. The second skill set or resource that I would say that was critical, that I knew about, but all of a sudden came into play, is the ability to be sensory acute, which means use not only your eyes, but hear everything that's going on and feel what's going on around you, because everybody has a primary modality or sense they live in. And I learned this years ago, but all of a sudden that day it came into play, because I'm a visual person, but all of a sudden you smell things on the plane, right? You smelled the burning on the plane. You felt the energy was different on the plane. You had to see what was going on, and you also had to hear instructions from people that were going on, like brace, brace, brace. So the ability to use all your senses was critical that day. And most people revert to their primary sense. But that day you had to be, and in time of crisis, you got to be open to everything that's going on and be acute what's going on with the senses around you. Yeah. And also the other key ones, of course, are leadership and teamwork. And that's what we already talked about a little bit, is the ability to check your ego at the door and to come together for the common outcome, the common mission. And that's what was one of the most amazing things of that day, because like I mentioned before, 155 people, you get on a plane, you don't even know anybody. You don't care about anybody else but yourself. And all of a sudden you check your ego at the door because other people, you don't know, you got to handle the whole situation. And that happened a number of times on that plane, not only with me, but I know of a lot of other people.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking about it, going, when you said sensory acute, for me, my primary modality is audio. I'm an auditory kind of guy, which is my preferred way of learning, consuming information, everything. And I'm just going, at that moment, you're saying, for all intents and purposes, you can't rely on just any one. You had to, and not only that, you had to rely on other people's, whatever they're interpreting. There was no room for, misinterpretation. There's just so much that has to go right in that situation. Do you ever sit back and just go, wow? Like,
I tell you what, that's after a few weeks, and after all the things that I did with the media, and I still do media events, but I sat down, I was like, this is really amazing what happened. If you pull all these things together, how everything happened so perfectly, and all of a sudden it came together in a way that produced an outcome. It blows your mind thinking that. I mean, one of the biggest lessons that came out of this for me was my modality, because I assume you have a wife, and I know you have kids. I've got a wife and kids. And what I realized when I got home is my wife it was totally auditory. She likes to talk, and she wants you to hear what she has to say.
Right.
I'm a visual person. And so if you show me something, I got it, and I don't need to you don't need to tell me 15 different ways on how to get it done. And that one thing in our relationship after the plane crash changed dramatically, because all of a sudden I realized, I've got to go into an auditory mode when I'm with my wife, or I'm not going to have a relationship 30, 40 years from now.
Right.
And that one thing has changed everything in the way we relate to each other.
Wow. That's well, we hope to learn from your lesson and not have to go through that in order to be able to relate better to our spouses. That's for sure. My wife does take in information completely, and she's hyper visual.
Yep.
She's visual. That's like her thing. And we know that about each other, which does totally help. So is there, like, if you, knowing what you know today, here's I think an interesting question. Knowing what you know today, is there anything you would have told yourself, that person that got on the plane? Is there anything that you would have said to that guy? Because you're there's no way you're the same. You're different. What would you have said to that guy that morning, now that you know what you know? Okay. So, one of the most important questions that we can always ask ourselves is, hey, now that I've gained some wisdom, what would I have said differently to myself if I could have had a chance, knowing what I know today? It's a way to understand, have I learned anything? It's a way to see what value you might be bringing to the marketplace. And most importantly, it's just a way to let you know that you are indeed making progress. Don't get bogged down thinking that, hey, I haven't done it yet. I'm not there yet. And because I'm not there yet, then I've achieved nothing. That's so false. Keep that in the back of your mind. Now, let's talk about today's winner, or this week's winner, for the Cashflow Diary board game. For the Cashflow 101 board game. Well, all you guys know, you got to go to star, rate, and review on iTunes. Star, rate, and review on iTunes. That's all you have to do to enter. And now you are perpetually entered for whatever it is that we're giving away. And today it is going to be another cash flow board game by the Rich Dad Company. One of the best board games on the planet, in my opinion, and that's what you get just for leaving a review. So when I announce your username, you need to send us an email to info@cashflowdiary.com so that you can claim your item. Today's winner is BT Murphy. BT Murphy, who left a review. So make sure that you leave a review if you want to be entered next time. But BT Murphy, what I need you to do is that I need you to email us your address so that we can send you your cash flow board game. Say you want to enter. Again, all you got to do is leave a review. Now, let's see what Dave had to say about what he would say to the person who he used to be.
I would have said, always be aware of what's going on around you. I think that's the one lesson I would tell myself. It says in the Bible, whether you believe it or not, Jesus told the disciples to stay awake. right? Be aware of what's going to happen. I think and you gloss over that, but if I had that lesson up front and I was more aware of what was going on, I think I could have added more value. I think I did a lot that day, but candidly, I think that one little lesson would have changed the way I probably would have approached a couple things in communicating with other people on the plane.
Yeah. Well, let's be real. I mean, you guys you did pretty darn good.
Yes, we did.
There's not much more, but that's like a true business version almost right there. It's like, yeah, that was good, but we could have improved it. We could have, gotten out of the aircraft in 2 minutes faster or something.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I asked the person who was responsible for this from the US Airways side that question. And because I think they did almost a perfect job of not only what their crew did and how they handled it from the back end. But she said, one thing I think we learned out of this is we could do everything right, but we had a real difficult time. We were not planning on people being deployed in New York and New Jersey and people actually going home just a few minutes after getting back on shore. So we couldn't find out where everybody was. So we couldn't make the announcement that everybody survived until hours later. He said, we have to have a better way. So I think you're right. It's that business mindset. How can I constantly improve something that's already almost perfect, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I consider it perfect. You
Yep.
guys are all survive. Period.
Yep.
That's perfect enough for me.
Right.
But I do get the need to continue to improve things, and I think that's something that anybody can. That's a very relatable lesson that for every one of us. No matter how many properties you've purchased recently, no matter how many deals you've brokered or whatever, you can always improve. I guess from this standpoint now, I guess what would you say is if you had to say the Dave Sanderson before and the Dave Sanderson today, here's the major difference that it has made for me. This is how I relate to the world differently in this way. These are some of the things that I now do differently. How would you fill in that?
I would say the number one thing has changed dramatically for me is before January 15th, 2009, I was so focused on supporting my family and making all the money in the world. And because I saw that as a model of my dad, that's what he did. He was not home a lot, but he was always supporting and financially being there for his family. So I used that as my role model. And candidly, after that, I changed that. It's like maybe my dad's model was good for him, but candidly, I was missing out on a lot of relationships with my kids because I was so focused on supporting them, I wasn't there for them. So now, the biggest change is I schedule everything I do around all my kids and my wife's events. Now, candidly, there's sometimes you can't do everything perfect. But now I don't work for Oracle anymore, which has changed dramatically. That's changed dramatically likewise, because now I can schedule my time around them and not have to worry about it. So if I'm here speaking with you, but my kids were having something at school, I would have told you I couldn't do this until much later because my kids and my family have to come first. And that was probably the biggest change that I've made.
Yeah. I get that. The things that are truly important come
Right
to the top, and those are the ones that you would solve the most. So if you were, I guess, addressing, let's just say, a group of business owners, kind of like you are right now,
Right.
When they're facing a challenge, what would you say? Something that they consider that could be business ending, life ending. Well, not necessarily life ending, because we don't end up in that particular situation too often, but what would you say if you said, hey, here's my 3-step program to make sure that you think your way through and you get your team to go through this properly? What would that look like?
Well, I tell you, I will share a story which will lead into how I will respond to that. So I actually did a workshop last week for a group of real estate business leaders in the New Jersey, Philadelphia, Delaware area. These are the top producers of one of the biggest real estate companies in the country in that region. And I went through this and I shared them a story. I said, back in 1999, I had the honor and privilege of escorting General Norman Schwarzkopf for 45 minutes when we were in Hawaii together. And candidly, being around a 4-star general, if you ever had that opportunity, it's an amazing experience being around somebody who's not only attained that rank, but has led people, thousands of people. And I asked him a question. And he looked at me and said, are you just asking or you really want to know? And it's like straightforward. I'm like, sir, I'd really like to know. And I asked him this question. I said, how did you win the war in Iraq so quickly? And he looked at me and said, every day people started bringing me their problems. That the women couldn't fly planes in Saudi Arabia. They couldn't drive the tanks. They had to pray a certain time. They had to pray a certain way. And I kept reminding my troops and my frontline commanders, how does this contribute to the mission of kicking Saddam out of Kuwait? He said, I had to keep people focused on the mission at all times. And that explains not only how he executed so quickly, but also why he didn't go to Baghdad. He had one mission. He was to kick Saddam out of Kuwait, not to go to Baghdad and topple Iraq. So fast forward 15 years or 10 years from that point to 2009, when I was with Captain Sullenberger talking to him and asking him his decision-making process. Because I love to understand, how do people make decisions?
Exactly.
And I said, tell me, what was going through your mind when all of a sudden this hit? He goes, number one, I had to focus on the mission. And my mission was getting the plane down safely and getting everybody out. And all of a sudden, it's like within 10 years, I heard the same message. It's also about mission. So going back to your question, the first thing I would talk about is mission-focused leadership. Understanding what your mission and outcome and mission and focus is, and focusing everything on that. Second, I would tell people the strategy on how you get a mission. And there's really a couple key points you need to do to get any mission. If you talk to Trump or Tony Robbins or Schwarzkopf or anybody, they'll tell you the two major things you have to do to get anything you want in life is take massive action and have discipline doing it. And that's a distinction. There's a lot of excellence out there, but how do people stand out is that discipline. And so I show people, if you don't do that, what happens? Well, you avoid doing the things you have to do. And second, you get distracted by all this technology around you. So why don't you use the technology as a tool instead of as a distraction? And then I show people how to use it as a tool. So all of a sudden now you get people focused on the mission, you're taking massive action, and you're disciplined using the tools. And that's exactly how I would set it up. And that's exactly what I talked about last week in Philadelphia.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Makes perfect sense. So let me ask this question. Why were you the last one?
Well, it candidly was not my outcome. My outcome, like I said, was to get up and get out. But I think when my mother said, do the right thing, and we got everybody out from the back of the plane, I made my way out. Candidly, I think there was probably still somebody getting out the front. But when I couldn't get out on the wing or the lifeboat, the biggest way I could support is keeping that lifeboat as close as I could to the wing. So I think there was a reason I was the last passenger out of the plane. And I think it was because, not was my intent, but God wanted me there to make sure I could lend support to anybody who needed help. And candidly, when I couldn't help anymore, and he gave me sort of that aha moment where the plane got shifted by a tugboat hitting the front of the plane, and water started going up my back. So it was time to get out. It's okay. You've done what you can do. Get out. And that was the moment. So I think it wasn't my intent. I think I was put there for a reason, and candidly, hopefully I served the greater good, and I think everybody on that plane did what they could to make sure we had the outcome that we did.
Yeah. Again, that definitely. I mean, you didn't even have to. You probably didn't. You didn't have to. You didn't need a board meeting to say, "Here's the goal, guys. This is what we're going to do today."
You're perfect. Everybody all of a sudden realized what the outcome was, and it's amazing when you get in total alignment with that outcome. And 155 people who didn't know each other, all of a sudden having a common outcome, what you can accomplish. This is a classic case study in teamwork and leadership.
Yeah, it says a lot about just some of your daily routines, and I guess for all 155 of you, for that matter, it says a lot about what is common. Like in the future, I'd love to see like a study on all you guys just together. How many things you guys have in common,
right?
Because there's got to be an insane amount of them,
right, in
order for that to come out. Even those that were the we'll call them non-business oriented people,
right,
they still have to have some of those same characteristics, etc. So to someone in your opinion, I often talk about individuals who are considering getting into business or thinking about getting started, or maybe they've hit a lull in their business and they're having some challenges right now. What would you say to that person who's still feeling a little scared, for lack of a better way of putting it, about actually going dipping their toe in the water and making something happen?
Well, last year on at the end of January, I gave up my job at Oracle and started my own little company. And I looked for people that had common mindset and mission. And everybody on my team, I have 3 other young ladies on my team, understand what the mission is. So number one, I would say, if you have people beside yourself on the team, make sure they understand and are loyal to the mission. Second, any of you're an entrepreneur, if you've done any business, you got to know you have to persist. And you have to persist until you get that outcome. And it may not be immediate. And there's going to be setbacks. There are times when, I'm questioning, did I make the right move of getting out of the corporate world? But then I go back to my mission, like, this is my mission. And therefore, Jesus didn't have every day in his life wasn't rosy. He had some good days and he had some bad days,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
right.
you look at it from a spiritual perspective, right? So how did Jesus get through it, right? When he hung in there. He hung in there, right? And he prayed to make sure he could get it. So I thought number 2 is you have to have that persistence. And third is you have to be certain. You have to have that certainty in your bodies. You know what? I'm having some rough times. I've been through rough times before. And I'll give you an example. I talked to my dad before he passed away last year and about the financial meltdown around the 2008, 2009 timeframe. And he looked at me, he said, this is no big deal. He said, I went through this during the Depression. You always get through it as long as you keep your mind right. And it was a great lesson for my father. It's like, you know what? He's right. This is not the first time anything of this has happened. So, as long as you keep focused on that outcome, focused on doing the right things, you'll survive and you will hopefully thrive out of that.
Yes. Now, tell us a little bit about this new mission that you're on.
Well, the new mission I have now is every day I pray just to impact one new person. So every day I wake up with a new mission. Well, the mission stays the same, is how can I impact even more people, but most importantly, enjoy the process. It's that second part where people usually leave off when they set their mission statement up, is they can get a mission, a grandiose mission, but are they really enjoying the process? So basically I set every day up like that, and my team does too. So now, and I'll refer back to the Bible. There's a passage of the Bible that says, if you give out, you give what you're supposed to give, it'll come back tenfold to you. And I think that's the common thing, because I focus now on contribution. And that's why I give so much of my time to the Red Cross and making sure that they were there for me that day. But I want to make sure I'm there for them. So when they have those things like the earthquakes and the fires and the floods, I'm there to help them raise money so other people can survive and hopefully thrive after that.
Awesome. I think those are all perfect and various different ways to transform, who we are and what we are and what it is that we want to go do. Now, for the people who have listened, this far, and they probably want to find out a little bit more about anything that you have upcoming. You've mentioned a couple of times that you're speaking here or there. If they wanted to catch up with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, thank you. The first, number one, if you go to my website, Dave Sanderson Speaks, hopefully we've done a good enough job to get the information out of where I'll be. If you're in the region where I'm coming, please use my Let's Talk on my website. Let me know, and I would love to interact with you personally. I try to do that every place that I go. Second, we're excited. My next book is coming out. It's called Moments Matter, and we're in final editing stages now, and we're focusing on a July frame to debut the book. So I'm excited about that. And also my story was picked up by a producer out of Philadelphia for a movie called Be Who You Are. And now I just got information yesterday. It's officially going to be now released in Philadelphia between July 7th and 12th. So if you're in the Philadelphia region, let me know. And if you'd like to come see it, I'll be more than happy to give you the specifics on when that's released. But then lastly, the documentary that I've been involved with now for 2 years called Miracles on the Hudson, where they took basically 7 or 8 of us and basically reenacted our stories, all of our stories, which you'll see me on a plane, you'll see me on a boat, you'll see me in the water, you'll see me in a hospital, and just like the other people. And they bring them all together to show people how did this thing really come together. And I'm excited. That's going to be debuted in New York City on January 15th, 2016. So between that and speaking and doing as many workshops as I can to support the missions of people and teach these lessons and strategies from that day, which my mission is now, teaching these 12 strategies to people. So when they have what I call their own personal plane crash, they know to have their own know the resources they can use to call upon to get them through it and hopefully thrive.
Excellent. Makes perfect sense. So with that being said, one of the things that I would like to say is that I appreciate you being who you are, stepping into the greatness that you were clearly born to be, and for investing your time with us here at the Cashflow Diary audience.
Thank you very much for having me. I was honored to be invited, and I really enjoyed our time together today.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means get over to the website, go to the Facebook page, hit the like button. You know you want more, so go get it. Because at the end of the day, it's leaders who are going to make the difference, and leaders can learn best from other leaders. It's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.